Imagine this. 24 warships cutting through the ocean, fighter jets ready on the runway. An island just 90 miles away from America, hiding weapons powerful enough to erase cities. For 13 days, the world held its breath, as two leaders faced off in a silent game that could have ended civilization. This is the story of those 13 days and how humanity stepped back from the edge. Today, we'll uncover the full story behind the Cuban Missile Crisis, the secret missions, the miscalculations, and the quiet decisions that saved the world. To make this story flow like a movie, I'll use new names. U.S. President Daniel Hayes, Soviet Premier Igor Petrov, and Cuban revolutionary Mateo Alvarez. The names are fictional, but every event, every date is real. The year is 1961. The Cold War isn't just words anymore, it's a chessboard with nuclear pieces. The US has placed powerful nuclear missiles in Turkey, close enough to reach Moscow in minutes. To Soviet Premier Igor Petrov, that feels like a knife at his throat. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Hayes is still recovering from embarrassment. A failed invasion of Cuba known as the Bay of Pigs. It was meant to topple the revolutionary leader Mateo Alvarez, but it ended in disaster. That humiliation set the stage for everything that followed. After the failed invasion, the U.S. launched a covert program called Operation Mongoose, a secret effort to sabotage and overthrow Alvarez's government. Sabotage, propaganda, even assassination plots were discussed behind closed doors. It was dangerous, desperate, and exactly what convinced Petrov that Cuba needed protection. So he came up with a plan. In the spring of 1962, Petrov approved Operation Anadyr. The mission: secretly ship nuclear missiles, bombers, and thousands of Soviet troops to Cuba. If he could install missiles there, the U.S. would have no choice but to think twice before attacking the island again. Ships disguised as cargo vessels left Soviet ports. Crates marked agricultural equipment hid nuclear warheads. Even the soldiers didn't know where they were going until they were at sea. It was the most daring secret operation of the Cold War. But secrets have a way of leaking. By late summer 1962, U.S. intelligence noticed something strange. Soviet shipping to Cuba had exploded, more ships, bigger cargo, and radar stations appearing on the island. The new CIA chief, John McCone, sent repeated warnings. Something bigger than surface-to-air missiles was happening, but his concerns were brushed aside. Until October. October 14th, 1962, a U-2 spy plane soared high above Cuba. When the film came back, analysts stared in silence. On their light tables, the photos showed unmistakable evidence. Long missile launchers under camouflage nets, clearly designed for medium-range nuclear missiles. Those missiles could reach Washington, New York, and nearly every major U.S. city. The world had just entered its most dangerous moment. When President Hayes saw the photos, he called his top advisors into a secret meeting. They debated deep into the night. Some demanded immediate airstrikes. Others warned that attacking Soviet forces could spark a world war. The U.S. military pushed for invasion, but Hayes hesitated. He wanted to act without triggering Armageddon. After tense hours, he chose a third option, a naval blockade, or as he called it, a quarantine. No Soviet ships would be allowed to deliver more weapons to Cuba. But it stopped short of outright war. On October 22nd, President Hayes went on live television. He revealed the photos, declared the quarantine, and demanded that the missiles be removed. Across the world, families huddled around radios, markets trembled. Nuclear shelters were stocked again. The next morning, Soviet ships kept steaming toward the quarantine line. Warships waited. Fingers hovered over triggers. And then, one by one, the Soviet ships stopped or turned back. The tension eased, just slightly, but the crisis wasn't over. Then came October 27th, what historians call Black Saturday. A U.S. U-2 plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. In response, American bombers were placed on full alert. At the same time, deep under the Atlantic, a Soviet submarine was being hunted by U.S. destroyers. Cut off from communication, overheated, and under attack with depth charges, the submarine's captain prepared to launch a nuclear torpedo. But one man on board, Officer Vasily Arkhipov, refused to give consent. His decision stopped the launch, and quite possibly saved the planet. That single act of restraint became one of the most heroic moments in human history. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, messages were flying between Washington and Moscow. Premier Petrov sent a private letter offering to withdraw his missiles. If the U.S. promised not to invade Cuba, a day later, a tougher message arrived, adding a new condition: the removal of American missiles from Turkey. Inside the White House, arguments erupted again. Some said giving in would look weak. Others said refusing might mean war. President Hayes found a middle path. He publicly agreed to the first letter, the no invasion promise, and secretly agreed to the second demand. The U.S. would remove its missiles from Turkey in a few months, quietly, with no announcement. It was the compromise that ended the standoff. On October 28, 1962, the world exhaled. Premier Petrov announced that Soviet missiles would be withdrawn from Cuba. In return, President Hayes pledged not to invade the island. Over the next weeks, Soviet ships carried the missiles back across the Atlantic. The war that almost began ended without a single shot fired. Both sides claimed victory. In the U.S., President Hayes was praised for his strength. In the Soviet Union, Petrov celebrated saving Cuba and securing a secret deal on Turkey. Mateo Alvarez's government survived and still stands decades later. But everyone knew the truth. This was not a win for either side. It was survival. Soon after, a direct hotline was installed between Washington and Moscow. A red phone to make sure the next misunderstanding wouldn't destroy the world. Nuclear treaties followed, and for a while, the superpowers stepped back from the edge. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war. It taught us how fragile peace really is, how one cautious decision can save millions of lives, and how pride, fear, and miscommunication can nearly end everything. For 13 days in October 1962, humanity stood on the edge of extinction, and the only thing that stopped it was restraint. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to comment, and subscribe for more history told like a thriller. I'm unmasking the past, and until next time, stay curious. And remember, sometimes survival is the only victory that matters.